Okay, we are going to talk about a type of factoring that we haven't done this school year, and maybe you learned it in middle school. I don't know. So we'll see how it goes. But before we factor, I just want to review multiplying, not because I don't think you know what to do, but I think it's helpful to think about before we factor these. So if I were to multiply these binomials, 3x times x would be 3x squared. 3x times 5 would be 15x minus 4x and minus 20. Okay, so in the middle, I have like terms, so I end up with 3x squared. 15 and negative 4 would be 11x minus 20. Now let's just think about this for a second. This 3x squared, that came from the 3x and the x, right? And the negative 20 came from the negative 4 and the positive 5. It's this 11x in the middle that's a little tricky, and it's a combination of two things. It's those two things combined together. That's what gave us the 11x. And so that happened by taking the 3 times the 5 and the negative 4 times the x. That's how we got those two numbers. So it's a combination of things that get us the middle terms. There's not So we have to look at the options that work. Okay, let's look at this one more time, and then we'll try the factoring. So on this one, if I multiply this, I get 2x times 3x, which is 6x squared, minus 10x plus 9x minus 15. So that gives me 6x squared minus x minus 15. So this 6 was a combination of the 2 and the 3 together, right? And the 15 was the 3 and the negative 5. And then the middle one is a combination. So keeping that in mind. So what we're doing with factoring, when we were multiplying, I give you the problem and you tell me the answer. Now, with this factoring, I'm giving you the answer and you tell me the problem. We're going backwards. Now, the pattern that we're going to look at today is trinomials. That means they have 1, 2, 3 terms. Some terms are separated by pluses and minuses, and the leading coefficient, which means the number out front, is not 1. So when this is the case, we're going to do what's called just guessing and checking. So I'm going to go straight to my two parentheses. So the first part, I need to get 3x squared. Well, we can see from the example above, to get 3x squared, I know I need 3x and x. And to get 5 here, I'm going to have two things that multiply to 5. Well, the only thing that multiplies to 5 would be 1 and 5. Okay? Now, we know because, let's think of a couple things. It multiplies to a negative. These are going to have opposite signs, but we don't know which one yet. And we know that when we add them together, we're going to get negative 2. But since they're opposite signs, we're actually subtracting them to see if we get 2. So let's see if this works. Well, that middle term is going to come because this would be 1x and this would be 15x. And if I subtracted those, that's not going to get me to a 2. So that's why this is guessing and checking. So the 1 and 5 didn't work. So now I'm going to try 5 and 1. So when I do this, I get 5x. And when I multiply these, I get 3x. And if I subtract them, I would get the 2. Now I've got to figure out the signs. Well, I need this negative 5. I need the 5 to be negative so that when I combine them, negative 5 and 3 would give me the negative 2. Well, the way I get the 5 is between the 5 and the x. So the way to make it negative would make this one negative. And then I make the second one, I'd have 3 and positive 1, which gives me 3x. These add to negative 2x in the middle, which is what I want. So it checks out. So this is my final answer. Okay, let's try it again on this one. So again, we know we're going to need 3x and x because there's nothing else that would multiply to the x squared. 4, I could have 1 and 4, or I can have 2 and 2. So if I do 1 and 4, now here, because it multiplies to a positive, that tells me they're going to have the same sign. And because it adds to a negative, okay, that means that same sign is going to be negative. So I don't need to figure out signs this time. I know what they're going to be. So this gives me negative 1x, and that gives me negative 12x. And if I add those together, that's definitely not going to work. Okay, so what if I switched them and I did 4 and 1? That would give me negative 4x and negative 3x. That gives me 7. That still doesn't work. So if I try the 2 and the 2, I get negative 2x and negative 6x, which does add to the negative 8x, so that works. Negative 2 and negative 2 is positive 4, 3x and x is 3x squared, so we were able to figure it out through guessing and checking. Now, the more we practice this, unfortunately, there's not really a quick way to do this, but the more we practice it, you can start to do some of the multiplication in your head and be like, yeah, that's not going to work. And so you can try another combination, not have to write all of it down. Especially since I'm making the video, I definitely want to be writing this down to kind of help you out. So let's try another one. 2x squared. Well, the only way to get 2x squared would be 2x and x. So with 9, I have 1 and 9 and 3 and 3. Let's try the 3 and 3 this time. Let's see what happens there. Okay, now think about this first. It's going to multiply to a negative and add to a positive. So since it multiplies to a negative, the signs are going to be opposite. So that really means it's not really adding, it's subtracting to so we need to see the difference. So this gives us 3x. And this gives us 6x. Ooh, that's good news because we were subtracting. We could get 3. We want the bigger one to be positive. So that means we want positive 6x and negative 3. Well, we get the 3x here. So this is going to be negative, and that's going to be positive. Those add to positive 3x, and now everything checks out. Okay, 5x squared would be 5x and x. Now, since they multiply to a positive 12, they're going to have the same sign. And if they add to 19, that same sign is going to be plus. So we don't have to determine the signs on this one. 12, we've got 1 and 12, 2 and 6, 3 and 4. I don't really know where the right place to start is. We can start with 3 and 4. That's going to give me 3x and 19, or excuse me, 3x and 20x. That definitely is not going to work. Okay, if we did it the other way, that would give me 4x and 15x. Oh, 4 and 15 does give me 19x, which is what I'm looking for. And so we know that this has got to be the correct answer. All right, 15. Now, there's a lot of things that multiply to 15, but 3 and 5 is the most common, so that's probably the best way to start. So I'm going to start with 3x and 5x. Now 6, I could do 1 and 6, and I could do 2 and 3. 2 and 3 is more common, so it might be a nice place to start. Now this time they're going to multiply to a negative, so my signs are going to be opposite. So I want them to subtract to 27. So if I do it this way, I'm going to get 10x, and over here, that's going to give me 9x. That's not going to get me to 27. So what if I did the 3 and the 2? That gives me 15 and 6. I'm getting higher, but I'm still not at 27. If I did the 1 and the 6, that gives me 5 and 18x. I mean, we're getting there, but not quite. If I do the 6 and the 1, this gives me 30 and 3x. But remember, because they're opposite signs, we're really subtracting. And if I subtracted this, I could get 27x. So this is good. Now let's figure out the signs. Well, I need it to go to a negative, so the bigger one has to be negative for this to work. And the 6 and the 5 produce the 30, so this is what has to be negative, because I need the 3x and the 1 to be positive. And so that's what's going to give me my final answer. Okay, on this one, 4x. Well, I could do 4 and 1, or I could do 2 and 2. Let's try 2 and 2 and see what happens. 25, got 5 and 5. Well, if I do this, they're going to be opposite signs. It's going to be 10x and negative 10x. That's probably not going to work. So I could try 25 and 1, but what if we tried 4 and 1 instead? Maybe see if we make better progress there. That gives me 5x, and that gives me 20x. Ooh, we might be onto something, because if we think about this, it's going to multiply to a negative, so they have to have opposite signs. So that means it's got to subtract to 15. 20 minus 5 does give me 15. And then to make it negative, I need this negative to be, or excuse me, I need the 20 to be negative. Well, to get the 20, I do the 4x and the 5. So my negative is going to be here. And then I need 5 and 1 to stay positive. So I have to put this positive here. And that is going to give me my answer. Now, I think we talked about this in class, but I wanted to show you one other thing on your calculator real fast. If you're having trouble coming up with the factors, let's see, you can go to your calculator and hit the y equals button in the top corner. And let's say you want the factors of 40. What multiplies to 40? So you can do 40 divided by x. X is right below the mode button. So you do 40 divided by x. And then once you do that, we want the table, which is up here in blue. So anything in blue, we have to do second table. And the ones that are not decimals work. So 1 and 40 works, 2 and 20, 4 and 10, 5 and 8, 8 and 5. So now you can get an idea of what they are. Okay, let's say, go back to my y equals. This time I wanted something 108. Oh, so if I want things that multiply to 108, that's a little bit different. Okay, so I'm going to do 108 divided by x. Those we may not know as well, but again, if you want this, go to this table in blue in the corner. To get in blue, we do second table. And right here, that gives me all my factors of 108. So if you're doing a problem and you're like 36, man, I can't think of all the factors, then go to your calculator and look at some options. Okay, I'm going to have you try a few in Delta Math so you can see this process of guessing and checking and see if you can get some of them figured out. And then hopefully when we're in class, we will be able to practice some more in person.